The thundering sound of motorcycles stopped through the dusty country road. The black car of the leader fluttered in the wind while he briefly looked around. "Leave him here," he groaned. The heavy door of the sidecar was pushed open, and a lean, blind dog stumbled out, his fur furrowed, his ribs visible. The sound of the engines disappeared quickly. Only the gentle howling of the wind and the quiet whinnying of the abandoned animal remained. A few miles away, the 10-year-old Lenny sat on the veranda of her small wooden house, her legs dangling over the edge. She had always felt when something was wrong. And that evening, the air was different, heavier, expectant. "I'm going to the fence, Mom," she called before she ran into the fields. The dog, lonely, lost, felt forward with uncertain steps. He felt the hard asphalt under his paws, heard the distant noise of cars, and felt the strange smells of the unknown. He only knew one thing: he had to go. Where to? He didn't know that. Lenny, on the other hand, knew exactly where she had to go. Her gut feeling led her to the old apple tree on the roadside, and when she got there, she held her breath. A dog whispered to her. His ears twitched at her voice, his head turned slightly, but his eyes, gloomy, empty, saw nothing. Lenny took a step closer. The dog twitched back. His nose beamed as he tried to identify her smell. "Don't worry." Lenny knelt down and slowly stretched out a hand. The dog stared. For weeks, every touch was hard, every sound threatening. But this little girl's voice sounded soft. Her hand moved gently, there, a smell of something familiar. The smell of fresh grass, of apples, of something good. Slowly, almost unnoticeably, the dog moved towards her. Lenny held her breath. Lenny felt her heart beating faster. The dog was so close to her that she could feel his warm breath on her skin. But he trembled, maybe from the cold, maybe from fear. "You have no one left, or," she whispered. Her fingers twitched in excitement. She wanted to touch him, show him that he was not alone. But she knew that too much hurry could destroy everything. The dog carefully lowered his nose, sniffed at her. Fingers, a deep hesitant breath, then a second. And then, very slowly, he put his mouth in her little hand. Lenny held her breath. She didn't know why, but at that moment she felt that she couldn't just let him go. But before she could think about it, she heard a voice in the distance. "Lenny, where are you?" It was her mother. The dog immediately got going, took a few steps, back, and lowered his head. As if he had done something forbidden, Lenny turned around, called back, "I'm here, Mom." "Wait a minute." She looked back at the dog. He stood there speechless, his eyes blinded. "I'll be back tomorrow," she whispered quietly, and then she ran home. But Lenny couldn't sleep that night. She turned back and forth, while the picture of the dog remained in her head. The rain began to knock quietly on her window, and an uncomfortable feeling spread in her chest. What if he wasn't there tomorrow? What if he needed help now? Lenny got up. She knew she had to do something. She quietly sneaked out of her bed, pulled an old jacket over her sleeping suit, and opened the window. The cold of the night struck her. Her heart beat wildly. "Should I really?" she whispered to herself. It was pitch black outside. Only the distant chirping of crickets and the rustling of the wind could be heard. She knew it was crazy, but she also knew she had to do it. So she swung one leg over the windowsill and climbed out. Lenny quietly landed in the moist grass. Her heart was pounding with excitement, but she knew she had to hurry. If her mother noticed that her bed was empty, she would get in trouble, big trouble. The rain had become stronger, a fine drizzle that wet her hair as she ran through the darkness. The apple tree under which the dog was sitting was hardly recognizable, only a dark silhouette against the night sky. "Lenny, you're crazy," she murmured to herself. But her feet didn't stop. When she finally reached the old road, she stood up, sighed. The tree was still there, big and firm, but the dog was gone. Lenny's heart pulled together. Panic arose in her. "No, no, no," she whispered, ran forward. Let her eyes flash over the dark ground. Maybe he was just a step further. Maybe he was hiding. "Hello," she called quietly. "Are you still here?" Nothing. Only the quiet splashing of the rain on the leaves. Lenny bit her lip. She had hesitated for too long. She should have taken him with her. Now he was gone, and she had no idea where to go. But then, a noise. A quiet, almost inaudible whistling mixed with the sound of dripping water. Lenny stared. She turned around slowly, let her gaze wander over the fields. There, under an old bench by the roadside, lay a dark figure. Wet, trembling, barely visible. "You are still here." She sighed and knelt down. The dog pressed harder against the wood, as if he were afraid that it could hurt him. Lenny did not hesitate anymore. Carefully, she pulled out her jacket, spread it over the dog, and spoke with a quiet, soothing voice. "It's okay. I'll take you home." The dog did not move. He trembled so much that Lenny felt how much he was at the end of his strength. "Please," she whispered, and this time she put a hand on his back. But the dog twitched, and after a moment of stillness, he slowly put his head on her knee. Lenny swallowed heavily. It was decided. She would take him with her. But how was she supposed to do that without her mother noticing? Lenny looked to the dark street, then to the house in the distance. "I need a plan," she murmured. And while the rain continued to fall on her, she began to think feverishly. Lenny thought feverishly. The dog was weak, wet, and trembled like a twig. She could not leave him alone, but if she just took him home, her mother would notice him immediately. "Okay, I need a hidden place for you," she murmured. Her gaze wandered around, then it fell on her. Behind her house, next to the old barn, stood an abandoned chicken coop. For years, no one had kept chickens, but the roof was still tight, and the floor was covered with old hay. It would not be perfect, but at least dry and wind-protected. "I have it," she said determinedly. She pulled her jacket tighter around the dog, then carefully lifted him up. He was heavier than she thought, but she bit her teeth together. Step by step, she dragged him through the darkness, holding him in again and again, to listen to whether anyone was awake in the house. Finally, she reached the barn. With a quiet squeak, she pushed the door open to the chicken coop and knocked on it. The smell of old hay tickled her nose, and in the darkness she could hardly see anything. She carefully laid the dog on the hay, then took an old blanket from a corner and covered it. "Here you are safe," she whispered and carefully brushed him over the wet fur. The dog hardly moved, but when Lenny wanted to pull back, she suddenly felt something. His nose gently poked against her hand. A quiet, breathy sigh, almost like a sigh. Lenny swallowed. "I'll come to eat with you tomorrow morning, okay?" She stood up slowly. The dog did not move, but she knew that he had understood her. Lenny slipped back into the house, climbed through the window, and lay in bed. Her heart beat wildly. She had made it. But that was just the beginning. Tomorrow she had to find a way to keep him healthy, without anyone noticing. And she had no idea how to do it. Lenny could hardly sleep. She lay awake listening to the rain which fell on the roof and thought of the dog. Whether he was doing well, whether he felt safe in the chicken coop, or was he perhaps afraid that she would not come back? As soon as the morning broke, she jumped out of bed. Her mother was still sleeping, and that was good. Barefoot, she tapped into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and took out a few slices of sausage. Then she grabbed an old loaf of bread from the day before and a bowl of water. Quietly, she sneaked to the back door, opened it carefully, and stepped out. The air was fresh and moist, the floor still muddy from the rain of the night. Lenny quickly ran to the barn and opened the creaking door. The dog was still lying in the straw, rolled up like an old, tired bundle. For a moment, she feared that he would not move at all, but then she saw his chest slowly lifting and lowering. "Hey," she whispered, kneeling next to him. The dog did not move, but when Lenny held a piece of sausage in front of his nose, he pulled his nose lightly. Then, very slowly, he stretched out his tongue and licked it carefully. "You're hungry, aren't you?" Lenny tore off a small piece of bread, soaked it in water, and held it down. Deliberately, the dog took it between the teeth and chewed slowly. Lenny watched him closely. His body was thin, his ribs stood out, and his blind eyes looked gloomy and tired. But he ate, and that was a good sign. "I'll call you," Lenny thought. "Bruno. Yes, that suits you." The dog raised his head as if he had somehow understood the name. Lenny grinned. "Okay, Bruno. Now we have to make you strong again. But I can't hide you here forever." She looked around. Sooner or later, her mother or her brother would discover the dog. She had to come up with something. And then she suddenly heard footsteps. Someone came to the barn. Lenny started. "Lenny, where are you?" It was her brother Jonas. Her heart beat faster. When he saw Bruno, he would tell her mother. And then, it would all be over. Lenny had to come up with something quickly. Lenny felt her heart beat wildly. Jonas was only a few steps away. His heavy boots creaked over the wet floor. "Lenny, Mom, look for you," he called again. Bruno lay still in the straw, as if he had understood that he should not move. But when Jonas came even closer, Lenny jumped up. "Here I am," she called quickly and rushed to the door of the chicken coop. She pulled her behind her just so that Jonas could not look inside. He wrinkled his forehead. "What are you doing here?" Lenny knew that she had to think of a good excuse. "Your brother was not stupid. I saw a cat in him. She ran in here, I just wanted to see." Jonas shrugged his arms. "A cat? In our old chicken coop?" "Yes. A black cat with white paws." Lenny nodded eagerly. "But she's gone again." Jonas looked at her, skeptically. Then he shook his head. "You are really strange." He turned around and stepped back towards the house. "Hurry up. Mom wants you to set the table," he shouted over his shoulder. Lenny took a deep breath. That was close. She slipped back into the stable and let herself sink into the straw next to Bruno. "That was close," she murmured. The dog raised his head. His blind eyes almost seemed as if they could still see her. Lenny gently stroked his fur. "I have to come up with something better." Sooner or later, Jonas becomes suspicious. Bruno sighed quietly, put his head on her knee, and fell asleep again. Lenny knew that she should not waste any time. She had to come up with a plan, and quickly. But who could, though, she trust? Who could help her without betraying her? Then someone fell for her, Mrs. Behrens. The old neighbor was a vet in a retirement home. Maybe she would help if Lenny could convince her not to tell her mother anything. Lenny bit herself on the lip. There was only one way to find out. She had to go to Mrs. Behrens, even today. Lenny knew that she should not waste any time. She threw a last glance at Bruno. He fell asleep again, his shabby body exhausted from all the stress. "I'll be back, I promise," she whispered, then slipped out of the chicken coop and ran off. Mrs. Behrens lived 2 streets away, in a small house with a wild garden. Many children from the village were afraid of her. She was old, scruffy, and did not speak much. But Lenny knew that she used to be a vet, and if anyone could help Bruno, then she. When she stood in front of the old wooden door, she suddenly felt doubt. What if Mrs. Behrens sent her away? Or even worse, what if she told her mother everything? Lenny swallowed and raised her hand to knock. But before she could, the door opened by itself. "Are you still standing there for a long time? Or are you coming?" In Lenny pulled together. Mrs. Behrens stood in the door, her eyebrows raised. She wore an old knitted jacket and had reading glasses on her nose, as if she had seen from afar that Lenny would come. "Hey," Lenny hesitated. "I need your help," Mrs. Behrens muttered silently. Then she pushed the door open. "Well then, get out with the language." Lenny entered. The house smelled of tea and old wood. Books were everywhere, and there was a snoring cat on a chair. "It's about a dog," Lenny began carefully. "He is injured. I think someone put him down." Mrs. Behrens sat down in her old chair and took a sip of tea. "And where exactly is this dog?" Lenny bit her lip. She had to be careful. "Not far away," I waved her out. "I can bring her there, but you must not tell anyone." "Please," Mrs. Behrens snorted quietly. "Don't tell anyone." She put her cup down and leaned forward. "So you want to prove to me that you are hiding an injured animal without your parents knowing?" Lenny nodded eagerly. The old woman looked at her for a long time. Then, to Lenny's surprise, she snorted cheerfully. "You remind me of myself when I was young." Lenny blinked. "Does that mean you help me?" Mrs. Behrens stood up. Did you think I would leave you alone with a sick dog? She grabbed an old bag and began to pack things in it. A bottle of transparent liquid, a small soap. Come on, let's lead me to your secret, she finally said. Lenny smiled cheerfully. She had found an ally. But would that be enough to save Bruno? Lenny led Mrs. Behrens back to the barn through the wet fields. Her heart beat wildly, but no longer in fear, but in hope. Finally, she had someone who could help. When she opened the crackling door, Bruno lifted his head tiredly. His blind gaze looked for her, and when he heard her voice, his tail wiggled lightly. "There he is," Lenny whispered. Mrs. Behrens knelt down, patting the dog with a trained look. She carefully brushed over his fur, examined his paws and the old scars on his legs. "The poor thing has been through a lot," she murmured. "But he still has a fighting spirit, that's good." Lenny bit her lip. "Can he get well again?" The old woman nodded slowly. "With the right care, yes. But you can't hide him here forever. Your mother will find out." Lenny felt her stomach shrink. "Then she will send him away." Mrs. Behrens was silent for a moment, then she stood up. "I have an idea, but you have to trust me." 2 days later, Lenny sat nervously at the kitchen table. Her mother had forbidden her to go outside without permission, so she knew that she had created suspicion. Then she knocked on the door. Lenny jumped up. Her mother opened and Mrs. Behrens stood there. Next to her was Bruno, washed clean, with a new neckband around his neck. "Good day, Mrs. Thompson," said the old woman friendly. "I think we have to talk." Lenny held her breath as her mother shrunk her arms. "What does that mean?" Mrs. Behrens smiled. "I know that Lenny has hidden the dog, and I also know that you can't just give him a home. But I can." Lenny opened her eyes. "What?" Mrs. Behrens nodded at Bruno's head. "I have a lot of space and experience with animals, but I only take him under one condition." Lenny's mother rubbed her forehead. "And the arm." The old woman looked at Lenny. "That Lenny takes care of him. Every day after school, she helps me with feeding, training, walking." Lenny held her breath. Her mother first looked at Mrs. Behrens, then her daughter. Finally, she whistled. "If you promise to take responsibility, then you can help." Lenny jumped up. "Yes, I promise." Bruno felt the excitement, wagged his tail and poked Lenny with his nose. "Well," moaned her mother. "But whoa, you neglect your homework." Lenny fell around Bruno's neck. "We did it." Mrs. Behrens winked at her. "I knew you could do it." From that day on, Lenny spent every afternoon with Mrs. Behrens. She helped Bruno to fly, brought him orders and told him stories. And although Bruno was blind, he finally found his way with Lenny by his side. Because sometimes, thought Lenny, family is not what you are born with, but what you carry in your heart.